my friend. Guess what? It is May. We're on into the real spring, which for many of you will feel like summer. Some of you are just getting some spring weather. It is wonderful. It had been chilly off and on here, which I guess is what spring is, because I used to travel so much. Either I was in an office most of the week, during day hours, and then when I had first 20 years of my business, we were on the road all the time, and so I wasn't here during much of spring. And the past couple of years, it's been funny to experience spring like in an every single day being here, because it's actually a little chillier than I would have thought, but that's the way it is. So first, let's look at the Socialites block. I'm using my friend from Fig Tree, Joanna Figueroa's Rosy fabric. Look how gorgeous this is. I'm so excited. This is block number 11. Block 11. So you download the pattern. It came out, of course, last week. In the Fat Quarter Shop, Kimberly does her videos on Friday. And I enjoyed seeing all of your strawberry blocks, and somebody is making a strawberry runner. So good. It's all in my Facebook group, so you want to hop over there and see all of that. If you're not been checking it, come to the group, because as you know, Facebook just shows you nothing in your Facebook feed. You have to actually come to the group, which makes a lot of sense. If I work on my computer, I just make it a tab and it go right to the group. It works out super nice. Okay, the other thing we're doing is Good Company, and I'm using the kit with the blue mill fabric, which supports the Virginia Quilt Museum. And so there is 3 rows up on the wall. The first row is not sewn together yet, but let me show you a close-up with the other camera. Here are 3 rows of Good Company. The first row is not sewn yet. If you haven't started the alternate blocks, this square and a square, that's what you do this week. And Kendall's video shows you his tips for making that alternate block with the kit out of blue mill fabric, the Virginia Quilt Museum fabric line. You have this sort of limited palette of fabrics from blue mill. Now, if you were using your own fabrics, you might have them more scrappy. And Kendall actually showed you just doing a quilt this big, which is super fun, right? Super fun. Okay, there you go. Time to do some alternate blocks. I really love how this looks, and it does give very much an Americana feel, this fabric line for the Virginia Quilt Museum, Blue Mill. When you use it, no matter what combination, you're going to get that very nostalgic vibe, and it is great for our 250th anniversary of the United States. And I also have the link to Kendall's video, a direct link to that video here in the description box, the pin post, and at my website on the project page. So you can always just go and get that if you need to watch it, if you haven't jumped in yet. I've seen some great blocks from you. They are looking so awesome. All right, I have a little bit of a segment here now on looking at using alternate stitches for binding. I was just doing a little research, and I thought I would take you along while I did the thought process as I went through it. I hope you enjoy it. Let's go. Sewing 3 things at once. This is binding for Make-A-Wish. That is binding for the one gray and yellow quilt, and this is a little bit, this for Silver Lake, a little bit of outer border so that when it goes to the long armor, it just keeps all those outer edges nice. So just put that, and then I can trim it down after it's quilted so that there's just very little, like just a little bit, and then the binding. So that's what I'm working on. And then there's stuff for the jars, so I can sort of intersperse. But this is all chain piecing, chain. This is the gray, yellow, and turquoise. I'm using this again for the binding. So, excited about that one. Before we look at the stitches, I just want to show you that this is how the binding will look. There's a thread there, but this is how the binding will look pulled over to the front. So here's the front of the quilt. It's pieced on the back and pulled to the front. So when you're doing stitches, you need it to catch, either need to be all on the binding, or it needs to be enough on the binding, like coming over like this. You don't have a bunch of stuff flapping. You know, you can't have large sections that are not tacked down. Like some images have more like a straight line and all the things come out, and you can reverse image it and you can put all the things on here. So let's just take a look at a couple. So let me first come here and look at just like this snowflake. See the snowflake here? Now what would happen would be, there you go, the line down the middle would be your edge, right? That would be that edge, which would mean half of the snowflake on one side, half of the snowflake on the other. And you'd be trying the whole time to keep on that edge, that center line down here. To me, that is too fiddly. I don't want to have to do that. I do want to show you this one because I found it interesting. Once I looked at it closely, you can see that these things have like lots and lots of stitches. It's going like a zigzag, tight zigzag. That's a lot of sewing. I don't want to do that either. I don't want to do that either. That's too much. And so like on this particular one, was there something? Let's just look at this one here. So in this one, again, it's a very symmetrical, and so that means you're trying to keep it right down the center of that binding edge, which is too fiddly. So if you do something more curvy, then you would be like up on the binding, off the binding. But what you would see here is that this very edge would not be stitched, which would be fine because you're just going to have these, sorry, there we go. This little edge is not going to be stitched. So you would see you'd have like just a little bit of part that's not stitched, but it's stitched onto the binding. This will go off the binding onto the quilt and then back up. So that's not bad. Another one I want to show you is this one. Here you have larger sections. Now I don't know how close these are, but it's really pretty. But you would need to do a test and see like how long is this distance? Does it matter? You know, is there enough of it tacked down? And this distance isn't very long. That's not tacked. You're up on the binding, off the binding, on the binding, off the binding. And then, you know, look at your machine because you could have like a ton of different things here. I wanted to look for a little vine and berries. There, I was just looking for something with leaves, but this one, these look really tiny stitches. I'm going to have to stitch it to see what does it actually look like. So this is kind of the thought process. Like here's one with the trees where you would be like still trying to keep straight. You know, do you want this line to be like the, you know, here's the quilt and this would be the edge of the binding. That's just too much that you're trying to keep straight. This, here is one that's kind of like a pine tree. But again, you would be like, this is the only part that's stitching on the quilt, unless, you know, stitching on the binding is just this little part right here. So you would want to pull it over more this way to get it more on the binding. This is just showing you a center line for the design. So things that are more asymmetrical. Even this one is very symmetrical, right? So you probably would be trying to constantly keep that edge of the binding down the middle of the design, and that's just too much work for me. Here's a leaf doing the same thing. You know, it's just I want to do something that is a little bit more organic so that, let's go back to this one. This one's probably a little too tiny. I don't know if I can increase it. Length, width, let's see. No, it's not going to let me do that right now. I don't know. I'd have to read the manual. But there's lots of fancier ones in your machine, so you can find things that might be fun. There's, you know, holiday ones, cars for kids. I thought this was super cute. The bee, oh my goodness. But, you know, again, here's little bitty zigzags. I mean, you're going to spend a lot of time on each bee. And so to go all the way around your quilt, maybe more time than you want to spend for a binding design. So anyway, let's take a look. This is the bee. You can see the second bee a little bit better, but it just took forever. That first one got a little messed up, I think. But that took forever. Here was that little tiny vine with the little tiny berry, which I still think is just maybe just a little too small, so a little too fiddly, although it did stitch okay. Here was the curve with the bow, curve with the bow, curve with the bow, and then that was okay. That did take a little bit longer. And here is an alternating leaf to the left, leaf to the right, but not next to each other. And so you can see like where you're going to put the line down the center. You know, you have to kind of figure that out. Are you going to try to be super accurate or be a little bit more free-flowing? Or here I just pop the whole thing up onto the binding so that it's all up on the binding. Apologize for the camera not always being exactly where my finger is because bifocals and viewer. Okay, down here I did the wave stitch. Now here's where you can definitely see the gaps. So if I'm going to do the wave stitch, I personally would not want that big of a gap. So that means I would have to tighten that wave stitch so that there's not as big a unit in here. That's just more than I want. See, now I'm going to try to show you this. I'm doing this one-handed, so it is the vine, and I'm stitching it all on top of the binding. So it's not, you know, so there isn't any intentionally falling over the edge onto the quilt. I just kept it all on the binding. I did make the stitch width a little bit smaller, just like one down, so that it pretty much fits on there. And I have the guide beam, that's that green line, it's the laser guide beam. So here's what I did at the corner. What happened was, it turned out there's some straight stitches between, see between, the straight stitches were coming up, so I stopped when I got here with the straight stitch and pivoted, so I can come back down the other side. So here is what it looks like, and then here is what it looks like on the back. And you know, if you are a person who's crazy particular about your back, then these kind of things are probably not your style, but I'm happy with it. I love it. So this is working out really good. And here is the quilt with the binding done. Yay, so I can hang it up and enjoy it. I really love this one. If you sewed this quilt along with me, share it today in my Facebook group, Quilt Along with Pat Sloan, and say that you saw that you're sharing. You know, I don't have great visibility on this side of the room, but there you go. And I used a Harmony wide back in this light blue for the backing. Okay, let me sit back down. The other day I finished my Flower Power, at least that's what I call it. I think it's called Flea Market Flowers. The link is in the description box and at the pinned post. So yeah, it's done. It's done. It's done. And I am not going to make it into anything else right now. It is just going to stay like this. I'm going to store it. But I did work on the bee. Miss Queen Bee, look at her. I had to put the binding on. It's going to be the same fabric as the fireflies, and I think I am going to stitch either a little patriotic next, and then of course I'm going back to the red house, this one, going back to this one, going to do a little bit more on this one, I have there's like 2 pages, and so I have to do a little bit more up here, and then I don't need to use the second page anymore. All that will be done. So that's the first goal. And then I want to stitch a small patriotic of some sort. I have a bunch of designs. I'm not sure which one I'm going to do. And then after that, I think I'll do the dragonfly that I showed you. You know, both like do small ones along with working on the red house. So I got to get the binding on there. Okay, my friend. You are going to make alternate blocks and maybe sew some rows if you are able, or just make some alternate blocks, but do some progress on your good company. Show us where you are, how you're moving along. If you're just picking your fabric, show us the fabric you're going to use, and have fun. Plus, go ahead and get your socialites block if you didn't do that already. I had to cough. So I love you. Mwah. Thank you for being here in the Sloan Zone. I will see you online.